Good morning. On behalf of the NC Chamber, welcome to A Stronger Workforce, the business case for second chance hiring. I am Janelle Boyd with the NC Chamber. All attendees are muted to avoid any distractions during today's presentation. If time permits, we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. If you would like to submit a question during the meeting, please use the question and answer box. Please do not use the chat box. You may upvote the questions you most want answered by clicking on the thumbs up for that question. The questions with the most votes will be answered first. The recording of today's webinar and slides will be made available to you via email within 24 hours of the webinar. Now, I would like to introduce Chris Smith with Smith Anderson. Chris.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Janelle. My name is Chris Smith. I'm on the management committee at the Smith Anderson Law Firm and co-chair of the firm's business litigation team. I also serve on the executive committee here at the North Carolina Chamber. Smith Anderson is proud to sponsor this two-part series on second chance hiring and North Carolina's Second Chance Act, which is legislation our firm has taken a particular interest in and is working to assist with its implementation. Today is the first installment of the two-part series. This series is indicative of the importance of this issue to the state and our business community. The panel discussion today is moderated by Emmy Boyette, who is the Chamber's Director of Marketing. Prior to that panel discussion, Jessie Smith, a professor at the UNC School of Government and director of its Criminal Justice Innovation Lab, will provide a table set overview of the facts in our criminal justice system in North Carolina that have created focus on second chance hiring. In addition to being my spouse, and by far the better half of the team, by far, Jessie is a Kenan Distinguished Professor at UNC-Chapel Hill, and her school and lab are trusted, nonpartisan resources for facts and analysis for our elected leaders, helping them to make good evidence-based decisions. Also on the panel, we have Mariah Agsten, who is the Human Resources Department Manager at Sepi. Sepi is a planning, design, and construction engineering firm with hundreds of employees in North Carolina and offices also in South Carolina and Florida. Sepi is ahead of the field in that they have engaged in their own version of second chance hiring for some time, and Mariah will share their experiences today. Sepi Sadie, the founder of the firm that bears her name, also is on the Chamber's executive committee with me and is Mariah's boss. Sepi describes Mariah as passionate and thoughtful about the firm's HR culture and its corporate responsibilities, and that the firm is very lucky to have her. Rounding out the panel is Jeff Corzenick, Managing Director and Chief Investment Strategist for Fifth Third Bank, where he is responsible for the bank's overall client investment strategy. An economist by training, he's a regular guest on Bloomberg and the like, and quoted in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal on financial matters. Fifth Third Bank also came early to second chance hiring. Jeff is a recognized leader in this space and has done significant work on the intersection of the justice system and the labor markets. His forthcoming book is Untapped Talent: How Second Chance Hiring Works for Your Business and the Community. That book shares the business case and best practices for hiring people with criminal records and is absolutely spot on for today's discussion. Welcome to all our panelists and to our moderator. And with that, I will turn it over to Jessie Smith.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Chris, for that introduction, and thank you to the Chamber for having me. Welcome to all the Chamber members and others who have joined online. I was tasked with giving you a short introduction to the state's criminal justice system, in part because your approach to second chance hiring likely will be impacted by what you learn about who enters the system and some of the outcomes that it produces. So let's start with this, a highly simplified map of the criminal justice system, and the system starts here with the initiation of criminal charges. And since second chance hiring is about people, let's consider a person. Meet Mary. Mary has no criminal record, and she works at the local home improvement store. Mary has 2 kids under 5. She's a single mom. She also has limited means. She lives paycheck to paycheck. In this respect, she is like many Americans. We have survey data that indicates 40% of Americans say that they would have difficulty coming up with just $400 in an emergency, 40%. Well, one day, Mary makes a really bad decision. It's getting to the end of the month and she doesn't have money to buy gas to get to work or take her kids to childcare. So she goes to a local Quick Mart and she pumps $10 worth of gas and she drives off. Well, an officer's there having a cup of coffee and he immediately arrests her. She's arrested for a non-violent misdemeanor. Now, in North Carolina, we have 2 broad categories of offenses. First, we've got felonies. These are your more serious offenses. These are things like armed robbery and burglary. We also have misdemeanors. These are your lower level offenses. They are offenses like Mary's. So how common is Mary's crime in the whole state's justice system? At my innovation lab, we've looked at the numbers, and in 2019, North Carolina initiated 1.9 million criminal charges. Just in 1 year, 1.9 million criminal charges. The vast number of those charges, the vast number of them, 1.6 million, were for misdemeanor offenses, offenses like Mary. Can we back up one slide there? Someone else is controlling the slide. Can we pull up the poll for a moment now? We're gonna get our technology. It's gonna work seamlessly in a minute. Here we go. So here's our first polling question for folks. What's your best guess of those 1.6 million misdemeanors that make up the bulk of our justice system? What percentage of them do you think involve violent offenses? Take your best guess right here. We'll give it a couple seconds and then we'll see where you came out. This is also how we find out how people were paying attention, because the answer actually came up before it was supposed to. So Lisa, can you show us the results when we, well, you know, a good number of people got the answer right. If you could go ahead and advance the slide now. The reality is that less than 7% of those 1.6 million misdemeanors that make up the bulk of the system were violent. But there were about a third of you that didn't know that to be so. And the fact is about 93% of those offenses are nonviolent offenses. They are offenses like Mary's. And I often say that our justice system is largely a nonviolent misdemeanor system. And these are the numbers that back up that statement. Here's another thing about misdemeanor offenses. Of those 1.6 million misdemeanors, 1 million of them are for motor vehicle offenses. Non-impaired driving, we pulled those out when we did that analysis. Non-impaired driving motor vehicle offenses, things like speeding, expired registration, window tinting violations. So not only in North Carolina are we largely a nonviolent misdemeanor system, the great bulk of offenses, more than half of them, are actually misdemeanor motor vehicle offenses. Now, there are 343,000 felonies that are charged in that total for 2019, but even when we look at the felony offenses, The majority of those offenses are for nonviolent offenses as well. Can we go ahead and advance the slide here? Thank you. As you can see here, only 16% of those charged felonies were actually for violent offenses, and we used a very aggressive categorization rule when we did this analysis. So that's a little bit about the offenses that come into the system. It's a little different than what some people might think if your major source of news is the nightly news, for example. But let's continue in our discussion. The next stage of the process is being brought to a magistrate where bail is set. And let's pick back up with Mary. So Mary, as you remember, got arrested for a nonviolent misdemeanor, and she went to the magistrate's office, or she was brought to the magistrate's office, where the magistrate set a $500 secured bail in her case. Now, secured bonds are sometimes called bail. And here's the thing about money bail. If you don't have money, you don't get out of jail. To satisfy a secured bond, there are basically two options. You either put the resources down yourself, which means cash or maybe property, or you pay a bondsman a fee, and the bondsman essentially secures your bond. But either way, you have to have money to get out of jail. Well, Mary doesn't have money. She didn't have the $10 to buy her gas. She certainly doesn't have $500 of her own resources, and she doesn't have the money to pay a bail bondsman. Remember, she's like many Americans. Remember that survey data. 40% would have trouble coming up with $400. In her case, she's got to come up with $500. Now, that money bond that she got in her nonviolent misdemeanor case is a very common response to those type of charges. We did the analysis on that as well. And in North Carolina, 66% of misdemeanor cases ended up getting a money bond. Well, one consequence of the money bond is that they can lead to wealth-based detentions, even for relatively low amounts, like in Mary's case. Wealth-based detention refers to a case where the person's being detained pretrial not because they're a risk to the community, they're a danger that they're going to harm someone, but because they don't have the money to get out of jail. And that's what happens to Mary. She can't pay her bond, and so she will sit in jail until, if she's lucky, she gets before a judge who changes her and she could get out. Now, here's another thing about Mary's case. Given that she has no prior record, and given that this is a low-level nonviolent offense, when she's convicted, she couldn't actually get any active time. But she's going to sit in jail pre-trial because she can't pay her way out. And while she's sitting in jail, a number of things are going to happen to her. She doesn't show up to her job at the home improvement store, so she loses her job. She was a single mom of 2 kids, so now social services is involved with the children. She gets behind in her rent payment, and she faces a housing issue for herself and her children. She may get behind in her, so now she's got an even bigger transportation problem than when the whole thing started. We'll come back to Mary in a minute. The next step in the process is the trial court. This is where bail gets reviewed, a lawyer gets appointed for people who can't afford one, a guilty plea may be taken, a trial may be held, the person could be acquitted, they could be convicted. But here's a key thing that a lot of people don't know about our system. We're not a jury trial system. We are a system in which the vast majority of cases get resolved by a guilty plea. For example, in North Carolina in district court last year, there were about 21,000 trials. It's a big number, but there were 250,000 guilty pleas. That's a bigger number. And the research confirms this. People plead guilty just to get out of jail pre-trial. People like Mary, people who when they finally get before a judge will accept a plea offer to a guilty plea for time served in jail pre-trial because they want to get back to their families, because they want to get back to work. Now, if Mary hadn't been held pre-trial, if she had received a citation or some other type of service to initiate her case, and she had resources and time, she probably could have worked out an arrangement with the prosecutor to pay back the $10 for the gas that she stole. She could have, because it's a low-level offense and she's got no priors, get some kind of a diversion program that wouldn't have left her with a criminal record. But she didn't have those options. She was in jail and she didn't have time and she didn't have resources. Now, at the back end of the system is probation and prison. And I checked last week, I went online to check and see what our prison population was in North Carolina. Prison is where you go when you're serving a sentence. And this is our prison population. It's just about 31,000 people. Now, remember when I told you about how many criminal charges we have a year? We have a huge number of charges, but this is the total number of people we have in prison. And the reason why there's such a big differential between number of charges and prison population is it's only the more serious offenses or offenders who have long prior record levels that actually end up serving time. Most people don't serve time in prison. People like Mary are not going to get active time, but they can sit in jail pre-trial and they can end up with a criminal record. Now, prison and probation are at the back end of the system, but sometimes the impact of the system can lead itself to cause re-entry. And that's what happens to Mary. Remember, she made a terrible decision. She committed a crime. She stole $10 worth of gas, but she ended up sitting in jail on a $500 bond that she couldn't pay. And she lost her job and she faced eviction, and there's a problem with custody of her kids. She ended up entering a guilty plea the minute she got into court, and now she has a criminal record and she can't get a job and she can't get on her feet. And there are so many points where the system could have treated Mary differently, but it didn't. And as a result, she now has a constellation of factors that create a risk that she is simply going to re-enter the system. And that's what I meant when I said that sometimes the impact of the system can recycle people right back through it. Now, I spend all of my professional time working with stakeholders to improve the system, to make it more fair and effective right from the start. But there are a lot of Marys out there. They're not all Marys, but there are a lot of Marys out there. How many? There are approximately 1.7 million North Carolinians that have a criminal record. And the employment prospects for these folks are not good, and lack of a job can be a risk factor for repeat involvement. And these things, the criminal system and the unemployment, impact people of color more than others. One disruptor to the revolving door of the justice system is second chance hiring. And that brings us quite perfectly to our panel discussion. And I'll turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I think you painted a really sobering reality of our justice system, and I'm very grateful for your time and expertise, as well as Jeff and Mariah for joining us today. Just a reminder for our audience, as we go through our panel discussion, please feel free to submit any questions that you might have for our speakers to the Q&A box, which is down below. Please refrain from using the chat box for your questions because we might not be able to track those and see those. So use the Q&A box for that function. And I think how we're gonna go through this is, Jeff, I'm gonna start with you with a few questions for the overall strategy piece and the big picture piece. And then I'm gonna go to Mariah for more of the HR nuts and bolts piece for how this actually works inside a company from the HR perspective. And of course, Jessie, feel free to chime in whenever you'd like. So Jeff, let's get started with you. To start out, just go ahead and share with our audience why you think business leaders should care about this in general.
Well, the backdrop of this is that when done right, second chance hiring is an opportunity to acquire dedicated, engaged, and productive employees. So employers should consider this because it's a route to increasing their profitability and supplying their talent needs. But there's a particular need for businesses to focus on this now, or two really. One is that we have a demographically destined talent shortage in front of us. The business community has actually had the advantage of the millennial boom. Millennial birth rates peaked in 1990, so those folks are 30 years old who were born then. If we're now hiring, say, from people born in 1995, those birth rates were 20% below the millennial peak. And the birth rates today, the workforce will be hiring in 20-25 years, is 40% below the millennial peak. And even immigration is an incomplete solution because the birth rates globally are plummeting, and in much of the developed world and even many countries in the emerging markets, the fertility rates aren't sufficient to even keep their working population steady, let alone grow it. The other reason is that I believe capitalism to some degree is on trial today. Many people question whether the free enterprise system can deliver, can solve the social problems of society. And in many cases, I believe free enterprise in the business community has been unfairly blamed for some of these problems. But the reality is we can, as part of the business community, be part of the solution and do so in a way that is profitable for businesses to do so. And second chance hiring is the path. I always like to say that criminal justice reform is good for business, and business is good for criminal justice reform as well.
I like that. So how do businesses take this on, Jeff? What should they be thinking about with respect to second chance hiring?
Well, they first of all have to understand that it's an investment. It's an investment of time, energy, money. Any good businessman will understand there's nothing for free, and hiring people with criminal records requires a thoughtful process. We believe there are ultimately two components to the process. One is finding out who's ready to turn their lives around, because not everyone with a criminal record is ready. And that usually involves partnership with a nonprofit, perhaps with prisons or halfway houses, but those partnerships, when done right, effectively deliver a talent pipeline of referrals. And then the second part is to recognize that people with criminal records often need some level of accommodation. This is typically not because of their criminal record, but because, like Jessie's example of hypothetical Mary, these are people who often come from a background of limited resources. And it's not just financial resources, it may be mentoring, history of work in the family, transportation challenges, housing challenges. None of these things are the direct responsibility of the employer, but the employers need to be knowledgeable about these challenges their employees are going to face, and have referral networks and referral systems to support that continued employment. Great,
thank you. You know, the data that Jessie presented and the information that you've just gone through, it's so compelling. And of course, this makes so much sense in theory, but people love to hear concrete examples of how this actually works. So I wondered if you could offer us and our audience any kind of examples of how second chance hiring has impacted a business.
Sure. I love to use the example of JBM Packaging in Lebanon, Ohio. It's actually the case study chapter of my book, and I've spent a lot of time with their leadership team and visiting their facility. It's about prior to involvement with second chance hiring, they were about 120 employees. It's a second generation business. They make open-end packages, think like seeds or bank envelopes, open-end envelopes, excuse me. And they were out of workers. They are about 45 minutes to an hour outside of the city of Cincinnati. It's a semi-rural area. There's no bus transportation or other kinds of public transportation. The only train is a sightseeing train. So they had a limited workforce to begin with, and they simply couldn't find people. And they decided, the CEO, Marcus Shinseng, really deserves a tremendous amount of credit. He decided to try second chance hiring. And it had its ups and downs along the way, a lot of trial by error, but they're now to the point where over 20% of their workforce, they're up to 150 workers. Marcus, the CEO, says, I don't know where we would be without our, what they call fair chance hires. And their fair chance hires have a reputation within the company for being extraordinary workers. But here's the transformation that went on with the company. The company was, no offense to my friends at JBM Packaging, but it was kind of a more run-of-the-mill traditional manufacturing facility. They had a purpose, a mission, and the mission was to dominate the open-end envelope industry. As they moved into second chance hiring, they recognized that there was a purpose higher than dominating the open-end envelope company, and something that can really inspire and focus their business. So they have gone to their company purpose has three parts. It is better solutions, better lives, and better world. That has taken their business in new directions. They have focused on green products, for instance, and innovation in envelope making using plant-based materials that are much better for the environment than paper. They continue to expand their fair chance hiring program. They want to be a beacon for others to follow, which is very generous. They will educate their competitors in this area. And even their charge to their sales force used to be, you know, sell more envelopes, make more money. It's now, when you sell more envelopes, we can hire more people and we can help transform more lives. Guess which one is more encouraging? And they have a highly engaged workforce, not just the fair chance hires at JBM, but the entire workforce has become deeply engaged. And I would observe, as I've studied many companies that have done this, they all tend to become, whether they either started that way or ended up that way, second chance hiring is simply associated with more innovative, more forward-thinking companies. So it has been universally impactful in the companies that have pursued this. And it's been one of the most exciting aspects of this research.
It absolutely sounds like it. You know, here at the NC Chamber, we conduct a CEO poll, and consistently every year, one of the primary concerns of our CEOs is that talent supply. It's something that's plaguing not just North Carolina, but states nationwide. And it's really encouraging to think that just a little shift in perspective and maybe a consideration of all this new data can pose that solution that we need to that. And you've just given us some great examples of how that can positively impact not just companies, but people and communities. So thank you so much for that. Mariah, let's shift to you for a few minutes for that HR perspective. How does your organization, Sepi, Inc., handle applicants who do have criminal records?
Yeah, good question. So for us, you know, Sepi Engineering and Sepi herself has always been all about open and honest communication. And I think that's key for us. Most of our applicants come through employee referrals. So by the time the applicant gets to HR, they understand they have to pass the criminal check, the drug testing, all of the checks necessary to become an employee. And we just honestly just talk about it. It seems kind of simple, but we go through the process, have the person complete the information, get the background check back. And then the CFO, Rick Edwards, and I just sit down and go through it literally line by line to make sure we understand what happened. What was the situation? You know, Jessie talked about it with her example of Mary. Every situation is so different, and the stipulations around it, it's not a one size fits all. And if you box yourself into that, you'll never hire anybody. So we really take a very individualized approach. I think that's been, you know, for us at Sepi, that fits us. That's not every culture. That's not every organization. But I think because we take that individualized approach, not only are we able to make these hires, but, you know, we really have always been that second chance employer because of Sepi herself making that decision a long time ago of having just inclusion and giving people opportunity. That's what it's all about at Sepi Engineering. So, you know, I think we've always kind of fell into that category, whether we meant to or not. It just kind of organically became who we are, which has been cool.
It absolutely is. Thank you for that. Jeff just led us through a great example of a company that has done this well and has, taken some lessons from initial implementation and made it work for them in an even stronger and bigger way. And I wondered if that resonated with you and if there's anything different that, Sepi is employing versus what Jeff just suggested. So if you could kind of give our audience just some strategies that work for Sepi to make this work for your organization, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think Jessie and Jeff both, their understanding of this topic and passion for it is is very contagious to me. It makes me excited as an HR professional that can help put this to practice. It all just kind of fits together, which is really cool. But I think at Sepi, there's two pieces to our strategy. Again, whether this isn't something you'll find in our handbook, it's all kind of who Sepi herself has developed at the company. There's the culture piece of it where, again, she just believes in that second. She believes in a fair shake and a fair chance for everybody, whether you have a criminal background, whether you're a certain race or gender or, sexual orientation. She just doesn't care. She genuinely wants people to be successful. So, the word culture is huge, but if you take just a little bit of it as the leadership component, I think that's a key strategy for us. And then I'd couple it, Jeff kind of started to go down this avenue. We also had this organic sort of mentorship that grew out of one of our hires. So I use the example, we had a Tech 3 for us and very well known, had been with the company for a long time. He referred and really went to bat for this Tech 1. Went through the process, got him hired on, all was well. He was a great technician for us. But to me, what was critical and what made that successful was that Tech 3's not only just ability, but desire to make him successful. So we were talking about having that support system. It's critical. In the end, of course, the Tech 3, he checked in, he made sure the job was done, he helped them. But as you think about that, in the end, he cared. He offered a support system to this other employee that maybe didn't have it somewhere else. And ultimately, I think at Sepi, those two pieces are very important parts of our strategy and has made it successful.
I love that. Yeah. So you make this important point that it's not just about bringing them on board. It's about what happens once they are on board and continuing that mentorship. So that's fantastic. But let's be real. I'm sure there are some obstacles and some difficulties in implementing these practices. So if you don't mind, if you could candidly share what some of those obstacles might be in implementing this fair chance or second chance hiring.
Sure. I mean, I think you have to just step back as an organization and first and foremost, figure out as a group, do you want this? You have to make it a priority. You have to believe in it. From my perspective, on the personal side, I have a brother that's been out of the system for 30 years. So it's very personal to me. And then on the professional side, I have a boss who also believes in making that opportunity and that chance for all. So for me, it's kind of all the perfect elements and the stars are aligning. But to your point, we certainly, yes, we have obstacles. I can't just sit here and say it's all easy. It does take time. It takes commitment. But when I think of an obstacle and an example for this situation, I would just say sometimes we have to just make sure all of those stars sort of align to the person we're hiring, their background, the project they're working on, maybe the client. Because so I use the example of one of our clients is the school system, the public school system. And if you have any type of sex offender background issue, you can't go on the project. So for us, it is an obstacle. It's certainly not one we haven't been able to overcome, but we have to manage all of those moving pieces and just make sure they all align so that everybody's on the same page and everybody's well taken care of. And, to date, it's worked out for us. We've got a great operational staff that works well with HR, and we can make that happen, which has been really cool to watch.
Thank you for that. Jeff, did you have anything to add there with your experience, obstacles in implementation here?
I mean, there's the whole overcoming of objections, and those usually fall into three categories. One is safety and the associated financial consequence of that through liability, negligent hiring liability. The second is questions of quality and competence of these employees. A second chance employer in Lexington, Kentucky, the DV8 Kitchen, a cafe and bakery, had tremendous difficulty. People wouldn't show up. to eat there. And I said, were they afraid? He said, no, no, no. They associated second chance with second rate. And it was only after their Yelp reviews got filled with 5 stars that now it's become a tremendously successful business. And then there's the thought of what does this do to our public reputation? And all of those objections can be dealt with, but have to be worked through. And to Mariah's point, it does require leadership from the top and a culture that fits with that.
Great points. Let's take a minute to bring in our audience with another poll. Tell us what, if any, concerns you have about second chance hiring. We'll give it one more minute to wrap up with the poll. And whenever the results are ready, if we could show those. Oh, wow, pretty even across the board. And then none. Wow, that's encouraging. I like that. Thank you for sharing those concerns with us. Jeff, I'm going to come back to you. You sort of started this discussion for us. What is your response to those poll results?
Sure. So let me go through those. I mean, I think that pretty lined up where with client and customer concerns. I'll assume that that lines up with reputation. Let me start with the safety and liability issue. This is a matter of as Mariah at Sepi does, understanding the circumstances surrounding someone's arrest, understanding the facts are that even a violent crime does not mean it's a violent person. Many of these are simply mistakes of youth or related to poverty, like Jessie's hypothetical Mary. And if you really take the time to look at it, it becomes fairly obvious. That's also why a referral system of nonprofits or prison authorities or probation and parole officers telling you who's ready, because those are the people who really build the reputation, build the relationship over time. So that tends to do that. There's some great policy fixes. They vary from state to state. Everything from expungement to certificates of qualification for employment, which offer employers liability protections. I will say that until recently, the policy community had underappreciated this liability risk. I got a lot of pushback on that early on, and people would say, yeah, but the chances of being sued for liability are infinitesimally small. And to which I would always respond, I have fire insurance on my house. The chances of my house catching on fire are really small, but it is catastrophic if it happens. The same is true with many of these private businesses. So these are things that you can work through or fall well within the parameters of business risk once you're knowledgeable. In terms of quality and competence, I mean, I think that's really just a case of understanding the evidence, which is that when you hire someone who's ready to turn their life around, when you equip them for continued employee, all the evidence points to you get a employee who is really grateful for the job and the opportunity, wants to prove themselves by doing a great job, and tend to be very, very loyal to their employers. And employers understand that high turnover is a huge cost, both in terms of onboarding, seeking out new people, lost work while you're understaffed, but it's also a setback to productivity. If you have someone who's highly engaged, who stays in place, they tend to be very productive employees. And every single piece of evidence and every study that's been done of true second chance employers points to that. In terms of reputation, I do think many businesses like to start with second chance hires in non-customer facing roles, and that's one possibility. It does tend to expand as they understand it. But I think the environment has also changed publicly, where both other employees of the company and customers want to see these companies engaged in higher purposes in solving social problems. So you see, for instance, restaurants that have focused on this, not just the Deviate Kitchen, but things like Edwin's Restaurant and Leadership Institute in Cleveland, which does an amazing job, Delancey Street in San Francisco. All of these have very loyal and large customer bases, not in spite of their second chances they offer, but because of them.
Right. Thank you so much. Mariah, can you add a little bit to the leadership piece of this discussion? Who leads this effort at your company? I imagine I anticipate the answer here based on what you've already shared with us, but just sort of talk about the role of everyone in making this work at your organization.
Sure. When I think about leadership in organizations, to me, my experience is, I would say, have you ever tried to start an initiative in your organization and it failed? And did it fail because you didn't have that top-down buy-in? And certainly there's things that can grow up organically through your organization and from the bottom up. Something like this, I think, has to come from the top. I think Sepi herself has done an incredible job of building out teams around her that believe in the same thing. So, you know, the CFO and I, Rick Edwards, we often talk about that second chance and getting people on board and how do we make it just as easy as we can for them. And the other piece I would say just about leadership, I think at Sepi, she encourages that just the love and the connection to people. So, you know, when an employee or a candidate has to call me, a total stranger, and explain that one night they made a really bad decision that they're extremely embarrassed about, you know, that often leads to tears and a lot of just embarrassment. It's a tough conversation. It's certainly much better to call and tell your new HR manager that you threw the winning touchdown or the Panthers won a game or something fun. But I think having that leadership that pushes just attributes and characteristics of understanding and acceptance is also key with that leadership role. And
that's a great point. Great point.
It does a good job with that.
Yeah, it really sounds like, you know, you all have done a great job of weaving this into your culture as an organization, which I think is key into making it a sustainable thing. We do have a question in the Q&A box. Let me read that, and it might be something that all of you can speak to, or, you know, I'll just kind of toss it out. Click on it here. And this is from Lavita. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. What about government agencies that take on second chance hiring? As a career specialist, I work with diverse individuals who are striving towards new careers. A few do self-disclose their criminal background and concerns about its impact on hiring. I'm curious more about government agencies like DOT who utilize inmates for labor, yet do not hire those with criminal background for the same position. Is there more context or explanation to this?
I'd love to take that one because I'm very, this one I think is incredibly important. State and municipal government should be showing much more leadership in this area. They have an opportunity to lead by example. And they have to follow the same model. It's not just a matter of many states and government agencies and cities have adopted ban the box. And so, you know, they are, may go through the process and then come up with someone with a criminal record. And when it's reviewed, they go to a secondary review and may staff that review committee with people who always say no. They may go with the best of intentions, hire people, but if they don't understand the support network that's needed, those employees may fail and that may cut off the opportunities for future. So they have to adopt the same model of selection and support, but there's great opportunities to do so. And they simply have a different set of stakeholders. I think government can play a huge role in setting the example. One of the best programs in the country for this is actually in Chicago. The Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, has a second chance program. They partner with nonprofits. It is a one-year paid internship. They still have to apply then for jobs, but they've placed over 350 people, I believe.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's one of the largest public transit authorities in the country. But I know I spoke to someone who worked in for the city of Greenville, South Carolina, and they hire people in waste management. Louisville has started an internship program. There are tiny pockets of this around the country. I frankly don't understand why every state and major city isn't trying to do something along these lines, because that's often how it works. If you looked at labor that's been marginalized in other periods of time, the Black community had great difficulty. It was often civil service jobs that were the entryway to normalization and to middle class, to a middle class job. I think states, municipalities, agencies, government agencies can be taking that kind of lead role here as well.
Jessie, Mariah, anything to add there?
I think I agree with everything you said. Those are really good points. The only thing that I would add, and it's not just in the context of government employment, but also in private employment, we haven't really talked much about the collateral consequences of a conviction. And in North Carolina, as in many states, the rules about the collateral consequences that it can attach for a conviction, it's like a bowl of spaghetti about professional licensure and occupational, all these kind of things that can be a hurdle to people getting a job. And that's another policy issue that a lot of folks are considering, particularly as they're interested in this issue, as local governments or private employers find people that they want to hire and then find that there's some kind of barrier for a licensure. So for your listeners who are interested in policy issues, that one is so complicated that my colleagues at the School of Government actually had to create a database so that you could look up by offense to find out what are the various collateral consequences that attach, whether it's to someone who worked in healthcare or in business or in other fields. It's just another issue.
I want to attach a number nationally, if I could, to those collateral consequences. Jessie brings up an important point. There is something called the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences, which adds all of these up across state, municipal, all the licensing restrictions, housing restrictions. Across the country, there are roughly 44,000 potential collateral consequences. And some of them are there for good reason, protecting children and that sort of thing, but many of them are ridiculous. Some states have restrictions on licensing to cut hair, to be a barber. If you have a criminal conviction, I get it if it's Sweeney Todd, and you've murdered people with scissors, but for the vast bulk of these convictions, that should be completely irrelevant.
And people also lose their driver's licenses when they can't pay their court fines and costs, when those fines and costs are more than they can pay, and then they lose their license. And in North Carolina, most places in North Carolina, you need a car to get to work. So that's another really important one.
Absolutely. Mariah, I wanted to pull you in real quick before, let's see if we had, there are a number of questions in the Q&A, but remember our audience can submit those at any time. So keep those coming in if you'd like. Mariah, I was recently reading over some research, and please, Jessie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was a study done by SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, along with the Koch Institute, that stated, I believe the number was around 55% of HR managers feel comfortable implementing this second chance, fair chance hiring initiative, which I mean is an okay number, but that also means almost half aren't. So, I mean, speaking from your role, what can be done to encourage this among organizations and people who might not be quite comfortable with it yet?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think it goes back to Jessie and Jeff were just talking about that collateral piece. I think that's a lot of the fear from what I've seen in the HR space is I can't take that chance because X might kind of happen to me. So that it's almost they just kind of slam the proverbial door in your face on it.
Right.
So, I think from the HR professional side, that number can absolutely go up. Absolutely. We can do better. But I think HR professionals have to be bold and willing to present these cases to the people ultimately that make the decision that have maybe the biases or the uncertainty or just the lack of education. It's why these webinars that the chamber is doing is so important. The more we can educate and talk about and understand, I think just naturally that barrier sort of comes down and we can improve those numbers. But I think you just have to keep chipping away at it. I talked about my brother, I use him for this example. 30 years ago, if second chance hiring was a bit more prominent, he probably would have a much different life. And I wish back then I could have pointed to an organization that maybe would have affected his life differently. But yeah, I think the HR world just has to keep pounding on it, keep being bold with it, and keep pushing the envelope. That's how you get change.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions yet in the Q&A box, but I did just want to pose this to all of you. So chime in however you'd like. We've talked about, the opportunities here, obviously, for job seekers and for employees, but what about the community? How does the overall community benefit from second chance hiring?
All of us, I bet, could jump in, but I guess I'll kick it off. One of the things that becomes apparent when you start looking at these numbers is that, and I don't think this had racial intent, but there have been racial outcomes from our changes in policing and criminal justice, and not just by disproportionate impact by race, but by poverty as well. I think Jessie outlined just the way the misdemeanor system just grinds up people and gets them on the wrong path. Once you recognize that it has had such disproportionate impact on Black community, poor people, you realize that the size of this impact is so large that it is facilitating and driving intergenerational poverty. When fathers, because it is disproportionate fathers, not mothers, when fathers aren't home because they're incarcerated, you lose that kind of mentorship. When there are too many barriers to working, you lose the history of work. How do you handle work? How do you handle the most basic, conflict with your supervisor? There's no mentorship. And so if we can institute second chance hiring, we do two things. One, I think we break that cycle of intergenerational poverty, which we all benefit from. We all have safer communities. We'll have more prosperous communities. But I also think it forces the business community to be engaged in policymaking. I've always said that we will have much better outcomes in criminal justice reform when the business community looks at people who have become justice involved or have become incarcerated or just caught up somewhere in the system and says, that's my future workforce. When we get to that point, we will have much better outcomes. We'll allocate resources where they need to be allocated.
Thank you, Jeff. I do want to get to the question that was just submitted to the Q&A box because I think it's a beautiful way to wrap up this discussion today. Angela has asked, how can employers connect with people who are a part of Second Chance? Is there an organization or group that help people get hired? So in other words, how do organizations get started if they'd like to participate in such an initiative?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in again, but
no, it's fine.
we actually talk about, it's very daunting, right? If you're an employer to think about I'm going to be at the prison gates handing out job applications. We talk about what we call bridging the box, which are 6 steps, intermediate steps to moving towards true second chance hiring. The first is to recognize that there are very low risk hires out there. If someone has a criminal record but has been gainfully employed for 10 years or 5 years, they're just another employee. So why are you screening them out because of that record? So just recognizing that a criminal record should not be an automatic disqualification. Number 2, visit second chance employers. I mean, people like Sepi are the real visionaries and leaders in our country and in the business community. I have found that all of them are willing to share their time and expertise, and they believe so strongly in this, they're willing to share, even often with competitors. Visit nonprofits that can help. Every community has reentry nonprofits. One way to get resources to find out where those resources are, simply Google reentry and your local community name. But you also have resources like the American Job Centers, which are in many communities and work with nonprofits and can help direct you to effective ones. Understanding the justice system, and this, I think Jessie just did a fabulous job, and I'm going to be tapping her for future panels. So no good deed goes unpunished. But there are other ways to understand how this works. The misdemeanor system, there's a great book out called Punishment Without Crime, which I think is must reading if you really want to understand this. There's a Twitter feed called Crime a Day, where a lawyer in Hartford, Connecticut, Mike Chase, pulls one absurdity every day out of the federal code. I wrote a book called How to Become a Criminal, or How to Become a Federal Criminal. It's my bedstand reading. Probably shouldn't admit that as a banker, but it's fascinating how easy it is to get a felony conviction. I think very important, and Mariah referred to this, eliminating vendor restrictions. You may not yet be ready to hire someone with a criminal record, but why are you keeping them from your work site? Why are you restricting the people who do the electric work in your building, who mow the lawn of your building? There are very often these restrictions in there, absolutely without thought. They just got put in, and they're worthy of reviewing. And then amnesty. What I have come across several times over the years of looking at this is employees who have been contributing to their firms for years, who have a criminal record their employer does not know about, and were it to surface, they would be automatically terminated. If someone's been at your work contributing to your company for, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, in some cases, these are people who've been working for 20 years and live in fear every day that this mistake of their youth will be uncovered and they'll lose their livelihood. I think we owe it to people like that to give them a pass.
Thank you, Jeff. Jessie, Mariah, anything to add there?
I would just add that in North Carolina, many of our jurisdictions have something called a reentry council, which is a group of people that work together in the local community to focus on reentry. So that's another Google term to go ahead and add. And if people have trouble figuring out who to get connected, find a way to reach out either through the chamber or through us directly, and we'd be happy to get you to who you need to speak to get started in your local community.
Thank you.
I would just echo that real quick. The same thing, just networking, resources around you, that's huge to kind of get any type of good initiative like this started in your organization.
And just so our audience knows, we will be sending a recap email out tomorrow that includes all of the resources that have been mentioned here. We'll be sure to curate those and compile those so that there's an easy access for those that have been discussed today. And then if our panelists give us permission to, we'll be sure to share their contact information so that you can reach out to them with those questions that might not have been bubbling at the surface today, but come along a little bit later. As we're getting close to the end of our time together today, we wanted to launch one more poll for our audience. Are you interested to learn more about I'm not even going to be able to say that word, about launching second chance hiring? Give that one more minute. And as you're completing this poll for today, I want to go ahead and thank Jessie and Jeff and Mariah for joining us and speaking so candidly and quite frankly so passionately about a topic that some of us might not have been very informed about. And it's very important for us to dive into this to realize the true social impact that's possible here. So thank you for your time. And Janelle, I'm going to toss it back over to you to close us out today. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you all for attending today's presentation on A Stronger Workforce, the business case for second chance hiring. We hope you found today's content valuable. You will receive a brief survey of the webinar via email. We would appreciate any feedback you can provide to allow us to improve these sessions. Again, the recording of today's webinar and slides will be made available to you via email within 24 hours of the webinar. Thank you all. Stay safe and healthy during this time. Take care.